Well, howdy folks, it's Matthew, your friendly neighborhood technician, making another video for you out of Boise, Idaho. And I am looking at a 2002 Ranger XLT FX4 4x4 with a 4.0 liter engine in it. Now this vehicle came to me with the request that I go through it and work my magic and find every little thing that I can that's wrong with it and suggest what needs to be fixed and what can wait, and kind of come up with a maintenance list and also a maintenance schedule for this truck. So that's what I'm doing. Now when it first came in, it ran pretty good. It was halfway decent, needed some love here and there that I noticed, so I started going through it. The first thing I noticed was that the coolant level was low. Now I went ahead and already topped it off, but anytime I see coolant level that's low, I normally go to the radiator and I check the radiator. Now this radiator was a gallon low on coolant. Between the radiator and the reservoir, I had to use a whole gallon of coolant in order to fill it back up. What the heck could be the cause of that? Well, you know, it could be a blown head gasket, could be a bad thermostat, you could have a leak somewhere. On the 4.0, it's hard to determine whether your thermostat housing or your intake or any of that is leaking down inside of there, because they got this so crammed in there you really can't see. So if you're low on coolant and you notice that you're low on coolant, start peeking down around here looking for any leaks, any seeps or anything like that. But if you don't find anything, then the next thing to do is to check your water pump. Now, let me explain how a water pump works. The bearings on a water pump need to be tight in order for the impeller to move properly and for it to turn and churn the coolant through the system. If the bearings are not tight and your water pump freely spins, then the impeller is not properly turning the coolant through the system, and you're not necessarily going to overheat, but what will happen is the coolant will begin to evaporate off, and you probably won't know it until you realize that you're low on coolant or until your car does start to overheat. Now, the scary thing that I actually don't like about Fords is their coolant temperature sensors. As you can see down in there, they are not made to read atmospheric pressure. They only read the temperature of the coolant. So if you get a vehicle like this one that ends up being a gallon low on coolant, which is about down to here, almost halfway down the radiator, the problem is if you have no coolant in the engine and the coolant level is below the level of the coolant temperature sensor down in there, it won't read that your car's overheating. You won't know it. And so you got to watch out for that. So let's go ahead and look at two examples. First, we'll look at an example of a good water pump, and then we'll go ahead and we'll check this water pump. All right, I got my camera set up here. Let me see if I can give you an example of a water pump. So here's a brand new water pump. And all water pumps, you know, they all pretty much work the same. They're belt driven either by the serpentine belt or by the timing belt. This type of water pump is driven by the serpentine belt. So is the water pump on the Ford. Luckily, we don't have to go into the timing. But brand new water pumps, they'll come. They do not free spin when you try to spin it. When you move that impeller, okay, there'll be some resistance. And that is actually how a water pump turns or churns or moves the coolant through the system, is that resistance that's on there, okay? When the bearings begin to go bad on a water pump, that pulley or that impeller will spin freely. You can also sometimes hear them squeaking and making noises. So let's check out this water pump. Yeah, you see how that spins freely? Let me see if I can get you down in here and listen to this noise. Hold on. Okay, I got a bus that's about to drive by. I'm going to pause it real quick. Alright, let's see if we can listen to this water pump. I know you can hear that. On top of that, the fact that it's freely spinning like that, that tells me that's a bad water pump. Now, that's a water pump that's on the verge of going out. So it may not necessarily cause the vehicle to overheat or anything like that, but what it's doing is it's not moving the coolant through the system correctly, and the coolant is evaporating off. So that's the answer as to why I found it low on coolant. And what needs to be done in order to fix that is go ahead and change out the water pump. Along with the water pump, you're going to want to change out the thermostat and the thermostat gasket. So what about cylinder number 5, slight misfire, and the fact that it's seized up? Well, luckily we're not looking at a blown head gasket. These are going to be isolated issues. So let's go ahead and look at cylinder number 5, spark plug. Now here's the catch with Ford spark plugs. You really need to change them as often as you can. They've got these extra long spark plugs. And the other catch is if you don't use anti-seize on these guys, which they don't from the factory, they get rusted, they get carbon buildup, and they get stuck inside of the cylinder. Now I've got a cool method of using a mixture of PB Blaster and Seafoam, pouring it down in there, basically getting it to turn just a little bit to break the threads open, and then letting it sit for sometimes two days tops, and letting that chemical break that carbon buildup so you can get these spark plugs out. So I got that spark plug out. I didn't find it covered in a bunch of coolant or anything like that. So that's really all that's going to be the issue. That is an original spark plug. No wonder why it's misfiring. It's beat up, it's old, has no electrode on the end of it anymore. So it's definitely time to get rid of spark plugs. So the main focus on this truck is going to be fixing the cooling system by replacing the water pump and the thermostat, and then also fixing the misfire by replacing all the spark plugs and all the wires. Other than that, there's just some simple things like it needs brakes all the way around. You can just kind of peek in here and look at this rotor and already tell it definitely it's time for brakes and rotors. And you can see, you can peek in there. Lighting's probably not that good. I can get my finger in here, and right here is where the indicator is, and I can feel it. Yep, as a matter of fact, yeah, there's the indicator, and I think there's probably like 20% pad left on that deal. So, you know, brakes and rotors all the way around. Complete tune-up with the understanding that it's going to take a little bit of magic to get all the spark plugs out. Water pump, coolant, thermostat. Clear the misfire codes out. Get it back on the road and make sure it's going to run right. After that, it's probably time to do things like change the catalytic converter and a few other things that I found on it. But the main focus in the near future here, is going to be getting that water pump fixed up, getting the cooling system fixed up, getting the plugs and wires fixed up, and then going from there. So that's what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get this water pump job and these other jobs on here sold, and then I'll go ahead and show you a video on how to change the water pump and a few other things. All right, everybody. Well, this is Matthew, your friendly neighborhood technician. Thanks for coming out and watching my videos, hanging out with me and supporting me. Don't forget to check me out on patreon.com and gofundme.com. I got a couple cool projects going on over there if you're interested in supporting me. But most of all, thanks for watching the channel. If you have any questions, get a hold of me. I love helping you guys out, and I also love learning from you guys too. So if you have any suggestions or anything like that, shoot them in the comments. All right, everybody, I am signing off.